Production funding for Behind the Headlines is made possible in part by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Speaker Beth Harwell on the gas tax, the surplus, and more tonight on Behind the Headlines. I'm Eric Barnes, publisher of the Memphis Daily News. Thanks for joining us. I am joined tonight by Beth Harwell, Speaker of the House. Thank you for being here.
You bet, enjoy it.
And thanks for letting us use this great space here at the Capitol.
Isn't it beautiful? We have a beautiful state capitol.
Yes, it's great. So the session has started. It's a quiet week, but things really heat up next week. You've got, a $2 billion surplus, a supermajority. Federal government is now all Republican, so this should be the easiest session of your life, right? Everyone's going to be totally in agreement.
Well, maybe it's be careful what you wish for, because we do have a lot of work ahead of us.
Right. Where are those divisions, seriously? Because, you know, you do have that supermajority, and I think people who don't follow the Capitol closely think, well, they'll just be able to do everything they want real simply,
right.
you know, real quickly. But
Well,
there are divisions even among Republicans.
Sure, and especially in a body as large as the House, when you have 74 Republicans in a body of 99, there's going to be differences of opinion. This is a very beautiful and diverse state, and my members reflect that. I mean, when you have a $2 billion surplus, that's argument number one, how to spend it. So.
Yeah, and those divisions, so, you know, in Memphis, people tend to think, you know, well, it's really the legislature just cares about the rest of the state. Now, I imagine everybody in the state thinks that, you know, the people in East Tennessee, the people in Middle Tennessee.
Right.
But from your point of view, the divisions, do they tend to be regional? Are they city versus rural? I mean, where are those divisions? And I don't need to make too much of them, but those differences of opinion. Well,
you know, I'm very proud of my members because ultimately at the end of the day, we put Tennessee first, but there is division between rural and urban guys. That's the main division that happens. You know, you're blessed in Memphis to have a great delegation representing you in the State House, and so I look forward to working with them.
The surplus, which people have talked a lot about, break down the surplus for me. I mean, it's not a recurring surplus.
That's right.
That's part of the caution you have right now. Is you got to plan for this is not going to be forever.
Absolutely, it's $2 billion. That's true, but only one of that is reoccurring money.
Yeah.
And we have been fiscally very well managed in this state in that we don't spend non-reoccurring money on reoccurring costs. So if you're going to put it in something that you know is going to cost you again next year, that's wrong. You shouldn't do that.
And some of the biggest news right now certainly is the proposal that Governor Haslam has put forward for transportation funding and a gas tax. It's been talked about for years. It goes back to the whole idea that cars have gotten so much more fuel efficient. There's been no change in the gas tax, so it generates a whole lot less money.
Right.
Where do you stand on the governor's proposal?
Well, I'm going to keep an open mind, as I've encouraged my members to as well. I mean, the Tennessee General Assembly does not raise taxes lightly. I mean, this is a heavy lift, but on the other hand, we haven't raised the gas tax in 28 years. And as you said, cars are more fuel efficient, and we've got a lot more road to maintain. And I believe in a very limited government, and we should perform those limited roles well. And one of those roles is infrastructure. How
about, you know, this whole, again, we talked about urban, rural, and again, you know, just thinking of Memphis, the cities in Tennessee have different needs than suburban areas and certainly than rural areas. Memphis has different needs than Nashville. Is there a formula a way of doing this that satisfies that maybe Memphis wants to put money in bike lanes, roads, and Lamar Avenue and all that, but also bike lanes and mass transit in a way that other districts that's not their issue? Right.
Well, the Department of Transportation prioritizes projects, and it has at least one project in all 95 counties that they would like to get started. If we were able to successfully push this through the legislature, we would begin all the backlog projects in 6 years. And you're right, Memphis is different. I know Lamar Parkway is a huge deal for you all. And my rural guys, completely different. In Nashville, it's a mass transit issue. So we give flexibility somewhat to the local governments, but then we have an overall strategy for the state.
There was some talk early, I mean, again, we're early in the session, but proposals with that surplus of trying to figure out a way to shift some of it back locally.
Sure.
So, and based on population and contribution and so on. So for a place like Memphis, I think the number one proposal that I believe Senator Kelsey and maybe Senator Norris had on the other side was a $50 million plus that would be returned to Memphis. Other areas would be more or less. Your thoughts on that kind of thing, of getting the money back to the local areas?
Well, we definitely want to, as much as possible, give it back to its rightful owner, which is the taxpayer.
Right.
So to come up with a formula like that, what I think would be very complicated at this point, and the state continues to have needs.
Yeah. The cities also, in Memphis, there's a lot of talk about the Hall income tax, which is an income tax on not on payroll, but on investment savings, is being phased out. I guess that started last year, am I right? There's a lot of concern among city government that, that a lot of that money, I can't remember how many millions of dollars to the city. Where is that going to come from? Do you worry in this era of, no one likes to pay taxes.
Right.
We all know that. We start with that premise. But in this era of cutting and reducing taxes, that you almost go too far because you deplete the resources, and as you said, at the end of the day, the state does have needs. It does have spending needs.
Right, and I would agree with that. And I've cautioned my members, let's be fiscally responsible about this. Everyone likes to vote for the projects. Nobody likes to vote for the funding, and that's lying to people. That's dishonest. So I would say with the Hall income tax, it will be completely phased out by 2022. We tried to set it up so that it's incremental, so it doesn't hit city governments all at once. But it is a legitimate concern. It is here in Nashville as well.
And so, what's in the rainy day fund now? How much? What's in it, and what do you want to see? What would your goal be for how much what's the appropriate amount to go into the rainy day?
Well,
fund?
every year since I've been speaker, we have added to the rainy day fund. We had to deplete it during some economic hard times, but we've got about enough in the rainy day fund to keep state government going for about 23 days if everything went south. So we are building it back up, and that's a good thing. It allows us to have a AAA bond rating, and when your financial house is in order, everything else runs much smoother.
Back to, again, cities and urban, we're talking about with the different needs that transportation might have on the transportation front. But I think it was the governor who said, and I've paraphrased this before, maybe last year, that he was worried there was this sort of decidedly or growing anti-city tone in the legislature. And I think he says that as a former mayor, of course, and someone who's been in Nashville and so on. Do you see that? Do you see an anti-city tone in some of the things that happened last year, and do you think that could happen again this year?
Well, I certainly hope not. Our cities are where people live. This is a wonderful state. But I do think that when the cities begin to encroach on state government, then you're going to have a little pushback, just like state government when we encroach on the feds, they push back on us. So we have 3 levels of government for a reason, and each of them serves a very valuable function in our citizens' lives. And we want to keep that distinction clear.
One of those that some people, de-annexation is a huge issue in Memphis. It was a big issue in Chattanooga, big issue last year. It went to summer study, and the task force in Memphis about to make its recommendations. You guys have convened. Is that an appropriate place for the state to get involved with how cities have annexed or de-annexed? In Memphis, there are people who will, write me ugly emails for saying this, but there's a point of view that the de-annexation may have been unpopular, it may have been, but it was litigated, it was done according to the law, and that's what the proponents say. If there's going to be some de-annexing, it can happen through the city council and locally. Right. But last year, it almost was dictated by the legislature. Is that an overreach by the legislature to tell cities like Chattanooga, like Memphis, and elsewhere how they should make up their boundaries and so on?
Of course, you know what? It depends on who you ask.
Yeah. Well, I'm asking
it's
you.
Like
today,
most things.
Today
it's hard for me because I have to admit I represent the Nashville area, which is a metropolitan form of government. So it's not real to my world. I do know that it mattered tremendously to my Memphis delegation, and I tried to work with them as best I could.
Yeah. Another local issue, and I don't know, it's a local issue, but the state has laws and so on in crime. And crime, obviously, nationwide, there's been a spike in violent crime. Memphis had a terrible run-up in the homicide rate last year. Other crimes were level or down, but that murder rate makes, and I interchange murder and homicide, and people criticize me for that, but they're horrible either way you count it. It was up, and what can the state do? Is that a priority at the state level to help the localities fight crime?
Well, we certainly set the statute as far as how much penalty there is. I think there's going to be a push this year to reevaluate the laws that are on the books. Again, that's another part of the code we really haven't updated in about 20 years. So there's some inconsistencies there. We'd like to get our sentencing more consistent across the board and be realistic. Prison beds are a valuable resource, and there's only so many of them. And so who's on our prison bed should be the most hardened criminals, not the white-collar crime. So we need to go back through our books and make some changes. But of course, the state wants to work with local governments in trying to get the crime rate down, and we know we have a need there in Memphis.
One thing, a lot of discussion in Memphis. There was an ordinance to minimize the fine for small amounts of marijuana, and there was a lot of fun, a lot of joking about that, and so on. But the people who advocated for it, Berlin Boyd, now the head of the city council, for him it was a criminal justice issue. It wasn't about advocating marijuana usage.
Right.
It was, look, let's allow the police to focus on violent crime, gang crime, serious level crime, and not have to play around with smaller ones. And that, I think for people, I don't want to speak for Berlin, but for people in that camp, that was just the first of things that they'd like to see fines and overnight jail terms come down. Do you see that notion of criminal justice reform, of, look, we're fining people too much, we're burdening them with fines for minor offenses, some of that state driven?
Right.
Is there a need to bring that down, that those petty crimes that are still infractions,
right,
but are over penalized and set people into a downward spiral they can't seem to get out of?
Right. Well, and that is true. I mean, when you set your fines too high, for some folks, that just means that you've put them into poverty and it's in this cycle. Again, there's always two sides to everything, and there are those who argue that we set the statute, and when you give too much discretion to the policeman, that can get you in real trouble. I mean, do you let a kid go because he has good parents or you know where he lives and this other kid gets a higher sentence? We can't let that. There needs to be consistency on the penalties. If I went out to the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, and they're very concerned with trying to treat marijuana the way it was back in the 1960s or 70s when it was really based on weight. The reality is it's potency now that they're concerned with and want to look at. So they can show me about that much marijuana and it's more potent than the whole bag of it.
Yeah.
So it's a major concern. It really is. But we will look at it this year. I'm sure that there'll be legislation at least concerning medical use for marijuana.
Right. There are some, back to prisons, I think I'm right in this, it's around 10,000 people in the state prisons or something like that. And last year you all passed a law that was targeted at trying to reduce the recidivism rate. The people who, because it was something like, it was a staggering numbers, 40% plus of the people who go into jail, it's for relatively minor.
Right.
I mean, we're talking about crime still, but relatively minor violations of their probation. Not that they robbed a place or they committed murder, something that, of course, they should go back to jail, but they missed an appointment, they didn't do something. And that is not only, you called it valuable prison, but it's very expensive.
It is very expensive, very expensive. And yes, we did go back and say, okay, it's wrong to miss your parole deadline, but is it worth sending you back in? Because that's, and these are people that are trying to make a new life for themselves, and it's hard to live under the parole system. But on the other hand, we've got to assure the citizens that we're going to try to keep them publicly safe. When you let someone out of prison, you need to follow them.
Right, because it's, I mean, I don't mean this cynically, it's a politician, it's everyone's nightmare, but politically, you vote to reduce the recidivism or the return to jail, and someone does something horrible.
Right.
I mean, that's
exactly
what,
right.
and you've taken that vote, and that's both got to be, it's got to hurt, and it's bad politically.
Right. And so we do have that second check of the Board of Paroles, who reviews all these individual cases, and it really should be done on an individual basis because it's all different.
Yeah. How much, I mean, a vote like that, when you're voting to reduce sentences, in the reality of electioning, of campaigning and re-election, I'll take you out of it for a second, but just your members, do they come to you and say, look, I get this, Speaker Harwell, but I'll get killed. If I do this, I will get, my constituents will eat me up and I'll get challenged. Does that happen? You don't have to name names, but does that happen?
Oh, it does. I mean, I have to tell you, one of the first pieces of legislation I introduced back when I was a new member was to increase the jail time for a repeat rapist and lower the time for possession of small amounts of cocaine. Cocaine was the big drug then. It would allow these people that violate cocaine to stay in the local jails, and it would let us keep the hardened rapist in the main prison for a longer time. And there was controversial because, as you know, politics is a tough business. So they didn't want the first brochure to go out and say, would they lower cocaine possession? So, but as I said, everything's a give and take. You got to balance it. We can't do anything that's going to cost the state to go into not having a balanced budget. Yeah.
Well, and back to the same thing with that pressure on the votes and the challenges. I mean, is that a fear among your members that look, I get it, I get why we should vote for this gas tax, but I will have people campaigning to the right of me that are saying he voted for or she voted for a gazillion-dollar, tax increase. I mean, that's got to be the fear, that how you pull that off.
It is. But I will say, I'll give my members, they really care what their constituents think. And so I encourage constituents to call their members, and if in your mind you really can't justify a tax increase, you don't want the additional roads in Memphis, then you need to let your legislators know that. But everything's a give and take. I commend the governor for presenting a problem, and one that we should begin to look at it addressing.
We talked about the federal government before and the demands that they put on. Obviously, a huge issue over the last 8 years or 6-8 years was Obamacare.
Yes.
We've got a new administration federally. They're moving towards it. They're calling for a repeal. It's not clear whether they're going to replace Obamacare at the same time. What's your take on that? And what it's a huge amount of money, and I don't know what the number of Tennesseans, I should have looked it up, but it's tens of thousands of Tennesseans are in the Obamacare exchanges. So however flawed they may be, however problematic, they are providing insurance to individuals and families across the state. And what's your concern about how this plays out?
Yeah, I think it's an exciting time to be in state government. I also think it's going to be a difficult time, because I think if President Trump does what I hope he does do, which is return these domestic issues back to the state and local governments where they can be efficiently and effectively run, we're going to have our work cut out for us. It's kind of like, be careful what you wish for, because if they say we're giving your education dollars back to you in a block grant, well, we're going to be able to do some new things. If they say we're giving you your federal money in a block grant on health care, we're going to have to really put a pencil to the paper and figure out how it's going to work for us. I set up a task force to look at, when we didn't make the vote to expand. I asked them
to expand Medicaid.
Expand Medicaid.
Go ahead.
A 3-star program. They've come up, my task force has come up with, I think, some really good ideas, and we may be able to lead the nation with breaker points to control the cost and still insure more people.
Breaker costs, what is that?
Well, just when you reach a certain point and it begins to cost the state too much, you pull back, so it doesn't get out of control.
I got you.
Yeah.
A block grant? What for people who don't understand what that is? It gets thrown around. It's getting thrown around a lot now because the federal government's talking about shifting a lot of things to block grants.
Right.
What is a block grant from your point of view?
Well, when you're taxed, whether it be your gas tax or a portion of it goes to the federal government, state government, and local government. And the portion that we send up for domestic programs at the federal government, the idea was they'd equalize with the states a little bit more and give it back down to us. The reality is, I would love to be able to keep that money that's taxed on Tennesseans and keep it here in Tennessee to better meet the needs of our students and the consumers here in the state.
So the income taxes that are paid at the IRS or 1040, whatever, that number would come back.
Right.
Okay. And that Tennessee would then have this discretion to spend, not be dictated to in the way Obamacare defined what had to be done, basically.
Right. Free us up from a lot of unfunded federal mandates.
Okay. Governor Haslam very publicly did not support Trump. What did you do?
I supported.
You did?
Yes.
Are you cautious? Are you wary? I mean, what are your feelings? I mean, there's such a range. It's hard to remember
really.
In my lifetime a president who's come in with such a wide range of expectations, from very, the avid supporters to the really fearful and everything in between.
Right.
Your take on this?
Well, it was a different kind of election. There's no doubt about that. There were times when President Trump made me nervous by some of the things he said.
Right.
But ultimately, I think it was the right choice for our country. I think you're going to see some exciting things happen. He is beholden to no one, and not even the Washington establishment. So I think that certainly he struck a nerve with the majority of Tennesseans, and they're expecting, they really have no choice. They have a Republican Congress, Senate, and President. We expect them to get things done.
Yeah. Back to local issues in Memphis, and these are statewide things, but just in Memphis, the state played a big role in terms of incentives for St. Jude and the $1 billion capital investment they're doing, and the $10 billion in just increased spending in Memphis, which people in Memphis are very excited about. The Service Master, which moved from out of corporate headquarters into downtown into a vacant building. Those state incentives, your take. I know those are generally they don't go for a vote through the House, but you all set up the parameters and so on. Do you think and it's a very controversial thing in Memphis, and maybe elsewhere too.
Yes.
Is there, from a state point of view, appropriate accountability on those incentive dollars?
I will tell you, we didn't used to have it in place, but now the legislature changed it and put a clawback provision in. If they don't produce the number of jobs in our state they say they would, they lose their tax advantages. It is a controversy because, you know, we really want to promote, most jobs are created by small business owners. We want to give them the breaks too, not just the big companies that we're trying to recruit into our state. So it's hard to have a level playing field.
Yeah, because we get that people come on the show and people, you know, in the paper and say, look, I've been here for 20 years. I've got a nice little, you know, I got 4 plumbing trucks and a little small business. Where's mine? Sam?
That's exactly
Where's my break?
Right, that's right.
Right.
That's right.
People have talked about whether you're interested in running for governor. It seems like everybody is. But are you thinking about it, or have you?
I'm thinking about it. I mean, I really enjoy state government, and I think this is where you can have the most impact for good for people's lives. So I will explore the option.
Thank you, Speaker Harwell. We appreciate it.
Indeed, my pleasure.
We're joined now by Bill Drees back in the studio to talk a little bit more about the legislative session. Bill, the reaction obviously from other legislators to the proposal for a gas tax. Beth Harwell talked about it being a heavy lift. Talk about some of the other reactions across the state and especially locally.
Well, the most universal reaction that we've had is the realization that the governor's package on the fuel tax and the tax rollbacks that accompany it will be amended. Probably in several versions by legislators because right now it does not have the votes it needs to pass. And that's not a slam on the bill. It's just that this is a very complex package in which much of the attention is on the fuel tax hikes that the governor has proposed. But the tax rollbacks are a very important part of this, and legislators are going to have very different ideas about what should be rolled back and how much it should be rolled back.
What are some of I wasn't able to get to that with Speaker Harwell. Some of the rollbacks include what?
Well, the one that's getting the most attention is the rollback on the state sales tax on groceries, on food, in effect, that you buy, not in a restaurant, but in a supermarket. There's also an acceleration of the rollback in the Hall income tax, which is the tax on dividends and investment income, which the state has already said they will phase out by 2020 or 2022, I believe. So you've got a combination of that is designed to make this basically a wash. The tax is increased on fuel and it creates a certain amount of income. That amount of income is what is the total amount of revenue that you lose with the tax rollbacks.
But you've got, and I can't remember who it was, you've got some legislators saying, you know, look, if we've got a $2 billion surplus, maybe, okay, only $1 billion of it is recurring, that means our taxes are just too high. We just need to roll back taxes so that we're revenue neutral. And then we can talk about a gas tax, and then we can talk about other changes. But that's the people's money, and it just needs to be given back to them. We shouldn't be playing games with it, you know, back and forth.
Right. And the argument on the other side is going to be that surplus is one-time money. These road projects, one single road project is typically going to be done in several phases, starting with right-of-way acquisition, moving to architecture and engineering or engineering and design on a road project. And that happens over several years. So if you take the surplus money for 1 year, you are just, no pun intended, or maybe pun intended, you're only partway down the road to finishing that road project.
Right. Well, and people here, you know, obviously familiar with the I-240 exchange from Walnut Grove and Covington Pike and up into near where the studio is, out towards Cordova. I mean, it was a long, multi-phase kind of a nightmare, some would say, and that's how things have gone. Just to localize some of these projects that are on the backlist, you know, Lamar Avenue alone, which is a huge priority for the business community because there's so much distribution, there's just so much activity down there, and the roads are inadequate. You just have to drive down there at any time of day, and you can tell they're inadequate to the amount of truck traffic and shipping that goes on. That's almost $250 million, give or take, to widen, to put in overpasses, to make that a more usable road. And then there are other ones from Austin Peay Highway, I-40 to Germantown Road to Canada Road. There's $47 million proposed there. Out near Arlington, another $40 million. I-240 from I-55 to I-40 near Midtown, another $50 million. Again, these would be projects over 10 years, but they've already been approved by TDOT. They just don't have the money for them.
Right. And one of the reasons they don't have the money for them is because our cars, our vehicles that we drive are more fuel efficient, so you don't use as much gas in driving that. Well, there's a gas tax on each gallon of gas or on diesel that you use, and that amount is declining.
What is there been talk by local legislators? You know, I mean, certainly advocacy groups and interested citizens want more bike lanes. They want more mass transit. For if there's going to be an opening of money into places like Memphis, have you heard from any legislators on that front in terms of mass transit and bike lanes and some of the alternative options?
Not a whole lot. The emphasis here in Memphis is so completely focused on the state road revenue for the Lamar Avenue part of this. Just last year, the state made one application to the feds for fast track funding. That is essentially a large amount of money, and it was all supposed to go for Lamar. Now, the state and locally here, we didn't get the Lamar Avenue grant that we applied for, but that is the overwhelming priority in terms of road projects.
It was interesting to hear, to segue a little bit, you know, you've got candidates for potential candidates. No one's declared for governor yet, but people like Beth Harwell talked about it a little bit. This is a vote that could come back to help or hurt her. Mark Norris, a lot of talk about whether he'll run for governor. What's he said about this gas tax proposal?
Mark Norris, in an interview with Sam Stockard, our Nashville correspondent, has said that he's fine with the rollbacks, but he doesn't know yet about the tax hike part of the equation on this. And Mark is running for governor. He will have a potential rival in the Senate in the way of Mark Green, who's a state senator from another part of the state. But the other thing is, as the majority leader in the Senate, Norris carries the legislation for the administration in most cases. So there's still a lot of amendments to be made on this.
Yeah, a lot more to come, but it was great to be at the Capitol. Thank you, Bill, for giving us some more insight, and thank you for joining us. Join us again next week.